biggest common denominator in this election is people want a good life and ability to provide for their family. And whether we agree or not with Donald Trump's plans, they thought that he was reflective.
One of the poorest demographics in this country, but they voted for Kamala Harris.
But there was a split, and more of them voted for Donald Trump than had historically. I think that there's such a desire. If you really think the vast majority of this country voted because of racism and misogyny, you're missing it. Most of my family, a lot of my family doesn't have college degrees.
But the stats are the stats.
But that's not, it doesn't say, I voted for Donald Trump because of racism. That's not, let me hear that. What stat are you talking about?
Let me just dissect the
Yes, you can.
An explosive showdown erupted on The View when Alyssa Farah Griffin pushed back hard against Sunny Hostin, tearing apart the long-repeated claim that Donald Trump's rise was rooted only in racism. By refusing to accept that single, oversimplified narrative, Griffin exposed just how deep the fractures run, not only in the media, but also inside the conservative Never Trump movement itself. The clash marked a turning point, where strategy and pragmatism are starting to outweigh ideological purity. The tension was undeniable as Griffin stood her ground, and the fiery exchange revealed just how much the national conversation around Trump has shifted.
I think it was the right thing to do, and I've heard a lot of folks on the left coming after Joe and Mika saying, don't normalize him. Well, 75 million plus American voters normalized Donald Trump by making him President-elect Donald Trump. And this notion that if sort of the resistance who opposes him stayed in their safe bubbles, sat on their hands and just complained about him for 4 years, that would have a bigger impact than sitting down. I talked to Mika actually. They met with him for over 90 minutes. They raised very valid concerns. They both see themselves as opinion journalists who want to actually be able to engage the person that they talk about every day, actually be able to raise issues with them when they're concerned. And in the same way that I thought it was right for Joe Biden to meet with him, and that I think it's right for presidents to meet with foreign adversaries to try to find diplomatic relations and ways to bring people together and solve problems, this is absolutely the right thing. I would sit down with Donald Trump, I would interview Donald Trump, and I'll go a step further. I hope good people work for him. We need to stop demonizing people because they supported a man who just became president of the United States. We should hope good people are around him and smart journalists are challenging.
Look, the bottom line is that America needs a free press that is willing to speak truth to power right now, more than ever. And I think that we have to be very clear-eyed when we think about the president-elect and cover the president-elect. And I don't think you need to sit down for 90 minutes at Mar-a-Lago and kiss his ring to be able to speak truth and to be able to cover a story. So maybe they're not journalists in the true sense. Maybe they're saying that they're opinion journalists. But we have to remember that Trump is the guy who ushered in the era of fake news. He is the guy who ushered in alternative facts. He is the guy who attacked 3 black female journalists. He's the guy that revoked Jim Acosta's press credentials for asking him a question. And so I think that this president-elect, I hate to say it, would like nothing more than to have only Fox News cover him, would like nothing more than a state-sponsored media. And I don't think he can be trusted in the way that other presidents can be trusted. This is an aberration.
Alyssa Farah Griffin's evolution on The View has been striking. Once a fierce Trump critic, she now defends figures like Joe Scarborough and Noah Grinsky for engaging with him, arguing that dialogue is far more effective than isolation. Griffin insists that the millions of Trump supporters across the country can't simply be dismissed as a fringe, but must be recognized as a central part of the electorate. The tension came to a head when she clashed with Sunny Hostin, who doubled down on her belief that racism and misogyny were the driving forces behind Trump's win, citing demographic breakdowns along race and education. Griffin countered with a different lens, pointing to Trump's surprising gains among Latino voters and other minorities, framing his appeal around economic fears and the promise of stability. The divide couldn't be starker, Hostin casting the election through the lens of systemic prejudice, while Griffin pushes for dialogue and pragmatism. Their exchange underscored the limits of ideological bubbles, and a growing recognition that demonization is no substitute for building national unity.
That as a country, it's very difficult for people to believe that racism and misogyny, they're just alive and well. I think that we don't want to think that about ourselves, our neighbors, our friends, but it's my lived experience tells me that it does still exist, even if your lived experience doesn't tell you that it exists. And the facts support that. I think we have a graph. If you look at there's a clear racial divide in who voted for Trump as opposed to who voted for Kamala Harris. It's very clear. I think it's an uncomfortable, inconvenient truth about this country.
But his whole point is they didn't vote for him because of racism and misogyny. They voted for him because they felt like, I think the biggest common denominator in this election is people want a good life and ability to provide for their family.
Well,
and whether we agree or not with Donald Trump's plans,
Black people
they thought that he was reflective.
One of the poorest demographics in this country, but they voted for Kamala Harris.
But there was a split, and more of them voted for Donald Trump than had historically. I think that there's such a desire. If you really think the vast majority of this country voted because of racism and misogyny, you're missing it. Most of my family, a lot of my family doesn't have college degrees.
But the stats are the stats.
But that's not, it doesn't say, I voted for Donald Trump because of racism.
That's
not, let me just ask, what stat are you talking about?
Let me just dissect the
Yes, you can.
Hold on. Calm down, everybody. Just take a breath. Take a breath.
The so-called never-Trumpers, once billed as the conscience of conservatism, are fading into irrelevance. Their loud opposition to Trump never shifted outcomes, leaving their influence battered and their audience shrinking. Republican voters don't trust them, and liberal allies never saw them as loyal partners. Strategists now admit their impact is minimal, forcing many to confront their dwindling role in today's political landscape. This decline has triggered a recalibration. The Mar-a-Lago meeting, where media figures openly engaged with Trump, highlights a pragmatic shift even among his critics. Meanwhile, Alyssa Farah Griffin's willingness to challenge liberal orthodoxy on The View has fueled speculation that ABC itself may be searching for a more openly pro-Trump presence to balance the panel. These moves underscore just how enduring Trump's influence remains, forcing both allies and enemies to rethink their footing. The question is no longer whether Trump defines the conversation. It's how everyone else adapts to his staying power.